Think about this for a second. By the year 1500 AD, the once thriving Mesoamerican cultures of the Aztecs and the Mayans had basically vanished. I mean, these were massive empires. We're talking millions of citizens, unbelievable monumental architecture, and a really profound understanding of math and engineering, and yet they were just gone. That's the core enigma of our whole investigation today. What could possibly cause such massive, deeply established cultures to just disappear from the historical record so completely?
Now, your first thought is probably, well, it must have been a drought, or a famine, or maybe some localized natural disaster, right? That's the conventional assumption. But the sources we're unpacking today ask a much bolder question. They're asking, was it a natural disaster, or something a bit more otherworldly? Instead of just digging in the dirt for clues, these theorists suggest we actually need to look up to the sky, and more specifically, to the ancient texts left behind by these vanished peoples.
And that brings us directly to our first section. Clue 1. Visitors from the sky.
So when you start looking at ancient texts from all over the globe, from Greek myths to Native American legends, this really prevalent theme starts popping up: sky gods interacting with humanity. The source material highlights this incredibly striking comparison. Back at the end of the 5th century BC in China, there was this legend of Huangdi. The texts say a great god basically took the form of a dragon and approached a young maiden. The sky got super dark, like a crazy storm, she passed out from terror, and when she woke up, the dragon was gone and she was pregnant with Huangdi, the legendary first emperor of China. The theorists point out how this tale strongly parallels the Western story of the Virgin Mary and Jesus. You know, an earthling woman miraculously giving birth to a figure who completely changes the world.
Which leads us to a pretty wild theory. Theorist Arthur Horn suggests a highly speculative motive for why these ancient interactions were happening in the first place. He states, gods deliberately bred with humans so that they could produce a race that they could trust and control a little bit better. So, the theorists are essentially arguing that these ancient myths might not just be made-up stories, but distorted memories of a real, organized effort by some powerful entities to guide or even control human civilization.
Taking that a step further, Thomas Bullard introduces what's known as the ancient astronaut hypothesis. He suggests that these mythical tales were actually literal descriptions. To quote him, they were not gods, but some creatures with advanced technology that came to Earth. According to this whole interpretation, these visitors brought culture, they brought civilization, but then, following some sort of massive breach or conflict with mankind, they just abruptly departed.
And this idea of a sudden departure leads us right into Clue 2, echoes of global cataclysms.
So if these advanced beings did leave, or if civilizations were suddenly wiped out, what do the historical texts actually say happened? Well, the really crucial detail here is how incredibly uniform these disaster myths are across the world. Whether you're looking in the Americas, the Middle East, or Asia, you see these terrifying themes of sudden, absolute, world-ending cataclysms. They almost always feature intense, world-drowning floods, devastating fires just raining down from the sky, or these unfathomably massive tidal waves. The argument from the source material is that these global legends are likely based on a core nugget of truth, even if they've been exaggerated over thousands of years.
You know, probably the most famous example of this comes straight from the Hebrew Bible, where God punishes mankind for its sinful ways by sending a massive flood. This deluge wiped out nearly all living things on the planet, sparing only Noah, his family, and the animals on the ark. The theorists we're following emphasize that this isn't a one-off story. Similar tales of near-total annihilation pop up in so many ancient texts globally, which to them suggest a shared human memory of a very real worldwide disaster.
Okay, moving right along, that brings us to Clue 3, monuments frozen in time. It's one thing to have written myths about a disaster, right? But do we actually have physical, tangible proof that the ancient world came to a sudden crashing halt? Well, in places like Peru, we find these giant blocks of solid granite that were quarried and then partially moved to their building sites, and then they just stopped, literally mid-build. It's as if the workers dropped their tools one Tuesday afternoon and never came back. It wasn't some slow, gradual decline of a civilization. It was a sudden, absolute halt to these massive engineering projects.
Theorist David Childress provides a pretty chilling explanation for this physical evidence. He suggests that at a specific point in history, everything crashed in a cataclysmic disaster. The
The world as they knew it just ended abruptly. We're talking tidal waves washing across entire continents, with whole areas of the planet going completely underwater. From this perspective, the reason all that megalithic construction stopped so suddenly was simply because the people building them were hit by an instantaneous, apocalyptic event.
Which sets us up for the final piece of the puzzle. Clue 4, cosmic cycles in 2012.
So how could ancient peoples possibly foresee events like this? To figure that out, we really have to look at the ancient Maya. 3,000 years. That is how long this brilliant civilization thrived in Central America before they vanished. That is 3 millennia of societal growth, architectural mastery, and honestly, mostly an intense celestial observation. They were a civilization that was completely, utterly obsessed with the movements of the stars.
And this cosmic obsession resulted in the insanely accurate Mayan calendar. Scholars point out that this timeline kicks off on August 11, 3114 BC. But of course, what captured the modern world's attention was the end date. The first massive 5,000-year cycle of this calendar wrapped up on December 21, 2012. Think about that for a second. The sheer mathematical precision required to map out a 5,000-year span with that level of accuracy is just staggering.
The sources note that the reason there was so much hype around the 2012 date was because of what the Mayans believed it represented. They were incredibly attuned to these vast cosmic cycles, and they believed these cycles were directly linked to massive, cataclysmic changes here on Earth. Basically, they were tracking a giant cosmic clock that dictated the survival or the sudden vanishing of life on the planet.
Which naturally brings us to the million-dollar mystery. Where on earth would they get that kind of advanced knowledge? As David Childress points out in the text, having knowledge of vast cosmic cycles that predict cataclysmic earthly changes, that is a level of advanced foresight that you just wouldn't expect an ancient, disconnected civilization to possess all on their own.
And this brings us to the ultimate, highly controversial conclusion proposed by the theorists in our source material. They suggest this advanced knowledge of cosmic cycles didn't actually come from human observation at all. Instead, it came directly from extraterrestrials. Yep, the very same sky gods or advanced visitors we talked about at the beginning of our explainer, the ones who supposedly interbred with humans and then vanished, leaving behind these massive warnings written in stone and time.
So, we've looked at tales of sky gods, global cataclysms, halted monuments, and mind-bending cosmic calendars. If ancient people truly did possess this advanced knowledge of cosmic cataclysms, and if it was gifted to them by otherworldly visitors, what warnings did they leave behind for us today? Are we simply ignoring the very signs they recorded right before their own Great Vanishing Act? It definitely gives us a lot to think about.